Welcome back, friends. Today's video starts with a little mystery and a little charm. A couple of months ago, I was browsing through one of my favorite vintage antique stores, and something unusual caught my eye. About 10 beautiful white books sitting on the shelf all in a row. I'd never noticed them before, and I have perused the vintage store so many times. I walked over and discovered about 10 copies of the vintage White House cookbook. The books were all lined up pristine, untouched. They looked new, old new, because you could tell they were very, very old. I couldn't walk away. There was something so timeless about them, something inviting and a little intriguing. I was immediately charmed.
While the name sounds exclusive, these cookbooks weren't just meant for the presidential kitchen. The most well-known version, first published in 1887, was co-authored by Hugo Zeman, a White House steward, and Fanny Gillette, a respected cookbook author of her time. Their goal wasn't to guard secrets, but to share them. The White House cookbook was designed to showcase sophistication, hospitality of the executive mansion, but it was always meant for the public. It offered everyday people a glimpse into the elegance of presidential dining, recipes, menus, etiquette, and household advice straight from the heart of Washington, and people loved it. The book became a bestseller, reprinted and revised for generations. It even includes menus served to presidents and recipes attributed to first ladies. In many ways, it's both a cookbook and a time capsule, a beautifully preserved piece of American culinary history. And today we're bringing that history into our own kitchens. I'm going to share two very simple but flavorful recipes from the 1930s era of the cookbook: fried eggplant and buttery fried cabbage. These are not complicated dishes. They could not be simpler, actually. But they carry the weight and warmth of tradition. Recipes once fit for the White House table, now made for mine and for yours. As I stir, slice, and serve, I'm reminded that history isn't just found in museums or textbooks. It's in the meals we make, the books we dust off, and the quiet moments we share around the table. Whether you're cooking for a crowd or just your little crew, there's something special about drawing from the past to nourish the present. To begin with, I cut the eggplant 1/4 of an inch thick, as that's how the recipe says to do it. Now, I do find that we do like it a little thinner, so I would try to get it slightly thinner than that if you want it to have a nice crisp. But it is really good, 1/4 of an inch thick too. Next, I'm getting about 2 quarts of water and 2 tablespoons of salt. The recipe says 1 teaspoon of salt, but I have found that more salt helps to bring the bitterness out. And also, I am doubling the recipe. You want to let the eggplant soak for at least an hour or 2 to help draw out the bitterness. I found that when people say they don't like eggplant, it's usually because it wasn't soaked in salt and the bitterness wasn't drawn out prior to cooking. I'm doing 2 eggs. To me, this recipe is more than just a historical national tradition. It is actually a tradition in my family. I didn't realize how much of a tradition it was until I got this cookbook, though.
Something special to me about this recipe, my mother used to make this when I was growing up. She didn't make it very often because she didn't do fried foods very often. She was a health nut before health nut was a thing and popular. But she would make this every now and then, and it was probably my absolute favorite thing that she made. If you're not going to be cooking up the eggplant quickly, all at once, you want to leave it in the water because, according to the book, and it is true, once you take it out, it starts to turn black. I have a couple different pans going, so I'm going to be cooking all of this up rather rapidly. What I like to do is, in this case, I will just strain it all up together right now and add the egg to all of it and mix it all up because I'm going to bread it all quickly and get it frying quickly.
For my 3 small eggplants, I found that 1 cup of flour was more than enough. I'm adding a teaspoon of salt to it. The recipe does not call for that. I think back 100 years ago, people had more sensitive taste buds to salt. So for them, perhaps the salt that was in the water that the eggplant soaked in was plenty for them. But Modern day people, I think, are going to want some more salt to this, and I find the salt is truly the magic that makes the eggplant come alive. I'm lining up my little breading station here. I've got the eggplant, the egg, and the flour with some salt. Over my years of making this, I found it really helps if you get the temperature of the pan right before you put the eggplant in. While those pans are heating up, I'm going to start working on the second dish, which is simply what they used to call fried cabbage back in the day. If you're like us and you appreciate the taste of cabbage, just plain cabbage, like we do, you probably are going to love this dish. It does remind me a little bit of Irish fried cabbage, though. Irish fried cabbage includes bacon, and I will say, who doesn't love that? So if you want to give this an Irish twist, simply fry some bacon in the pan before you add the cabbage. I do want everything to be ready at the same time, so I'm going to start frying the eggplant right now. Normally, when I do this for our larger family, I do these in much larger dishes, but I wanted to keep it traditional more according to the recipe for you in this video. I simply put all of the egg in with the eggplant because I'm going to be doing all of this in probably 2 swoops since I have 2 large pans going. The hard part is making sure all of the eggplant gets coated in egg. It isn't traditional, but you can season the egg, which I normally do recommend doing. After this, we're simply going to bread the eggplant with the flour and put it in the pan with some oil. You want to make sure there is a lot of oil in the pan before you put the eggplant in though. Maybe not a lot, but you don't want the pan to run dry when you're frying eggplant. It isn't good if that happens. It doesn't taste the same. And instead of getting crispy, the eggplant gets really limp. Fried eggplant is something I have been making since I was about 15. Of course, I learned to make it from my mom. When I saw the recipe for this in the cookbook, I couldn't help but wonder where my mom learned to make it. So I messaged her. I asked her, where did you learn to make this? She said her mom made it, and her mom would make it with eggs and flour. I find it special, though, that my mom remembered that this was a dish that her mom made because Grandma passed away when Mom was just a little girl. But obviously, my mom loved it so much that it made an impression in her memory, same as the dish did with me when I was a little girl. I can't help but wonder if Grandma got the recipe from one of the White House cookbooks. Through the years, my mom and I found sesame seeds are wonderful in this. You can take sesame seeds and put it in with the flour, and it gives them an extra elevated flavor. You can also play around with so many different seasonings. This is how you would fry up eggplant for eggplant parmesan, and if you were going to do it that way, you could add some Italian seasoning. I suggest adding an Italian seasoning to the egg because if you add it to the egg, it will not burn. If you add it to the flour, some of the spices might burn before the dish is actually cooked. Normally, I also add some garlic to the egg as well as a little bit to the flour. Dried minced onion is also another wonderful addition. Any garlic and herb seasoning also is a wonderful flavor enhancement. Of course, plain and simple with just the salt, the egg, and the flour is wonderful too.
lot of people in my lifetime who say they hate eggplant. I make this for them and they're sold. The biggest trick is you want to make sure it's salted well.
I want to serve everything up to the kids hot, so while that eggplant is finishing up, I'm going to start cooking the cabbage. Got about 1/4 cup of butter in the pan, and I'm going to fry the cabbage in that. Something I thought was so interesting about the cookbook is how simple and affordable so many of the recipes were. I mean, the presidents 100 years ago, they actually ate quite simply most of the time, it looks like. At the end of this, we do add vinegar, so you want to use a stainless steel pan if you want to do this all in one pan. However, if you fry up your cabbage in cast iron, it does fry up a lot better. If you do that though, you're just going to want to take it out of the cast iron before you add the vinegar. Vinegar reacts with the iron in the cast iron pan and brings out a really bad acrid flavor, so you don't want to add vinegar or acid foods to a cast iron pan. Thank you for joining me today, friend. I hope that this inspires you to open an old cookbook, try a new recipe, or simply savor the beauty of a well-loved kitchen. And definitely, if you see an old White House cookbook, you might want to snag it up. I'll see you next time.